Hello and welcome to YMT 220 Economics. Today we'll be speaking about Chapter 5, the first part, and we'll be discussing topics related to elasticity and its application. In a basic sense, what we studied so far in previous chapters, or let me be more specific, in the previous chapter we spoke about market forces, the demand and supply. And we discussed things related to how the demand and supply change based on certain determinants. Well, we addressed the idea of either increase or decrease or rise and fall in demand or supply based on some determinants. What we discussed is actually the essence of either rise or fall. However, if we want to, or if we would like to check the level of responsiveness of the change or of the increment or the decrement or the rise or fall of the demand or supply of a good or a service along or measured against one of the determinants of this change, then we will come up with the elasticity. So the idea of elasticity is actually measuring the responsiveness of the quantity demanded or supplied. So it is applied to both quantity demanded and supplied. Within this part, we will speak mainly about demand or quantity demanded, and we will measure the response, or actually how the change or how the quantity demanded changes based on the change of the main determinant that we speak about here is the price. So basically, we're speaking about the price elasticity of demand. You may apply it to other determinants, but what matters to us now, or in this chapter, is the price. So we speak about how much the quantity demanded of a good or a service responds to the change of the price of that good. So if the price falls, what happens to the good based on a percentage? It's not just a rise or fall. So we need to discuss the percentages. So we discuss the percentage of, we can check the quantity, the percentage of the quantity, the change in quantity, and then we divide it on the percentage of the change in the price and see what we get. That's the price elasticity of the demand, and we speak about the demand here. So this is exactly the idea. We speak about percentages. So the percentage of the percentage change of the quantity demanded divided by the percentage change of the price, or a change in the price. So this is exactly what we are looking for, and I can show you in a graph soon enough like this. I'll get back to the slides now. Look, rise or fall, it doesn't matter. If the price is rising or if the price is falling, it doesn't matter. And based on it, we take the percentage here. We know how to calculate the percentage. It's not difficult to calculate it. We can think about the easiest way. For example, the end value minus the the final value minus the initial value over the initial value multiplied by 100. That's the percentage of change. We can do the same to quantity. Well, we can think about, this is the beginning, this is the initial value, so end value minus initial value, or the end minus start over the start multiplied by 100. And usually when we calculate the elasticity here, we drop any negative sign because we don't care about actually whether it is moving towards a rise or fall. We care about the absolute number when we calculate the percentage, the elasticity of a price. All right, so let's get back to our slides. So this is the way we calculate this: percentages, the change in quantity based on the percentage, divided by the change in price, of course, based on the percentage. Okay. Based on that, we can categorize two main types of elasticity, or actually products, or demanded quantities or demanded goods, or two types of demands in general. What we can have here is elastic demand. Elastic demand means what? A demand or a quantity demanded that changes substantially or rapidly, or changes along with the change of in price in a substantial way, in an excessive way. It follows the price. So if the price goes down, it goes down. If the price goes up, it goes up. Okay? Inelastic demand is actually the opposite way around. When we have an inelastic demand, the quantity demanded responds to the change in price slightly, or there is a little response in terms of change in quantity demanded. And we will discuss why in a while. You don't have to hurry. Now I'll give you a few examples and you will understand what I'm speaking about. Now imagine, I'll just list down two items that we usually use in our daily life. And then you may think about these two items. Now think about this. Let's say for an adult person in one house, if we think about eggs and chocolate, okay, which one can be elastic, which one can be not elastic or inelastic? Well, for eggs, most of the houses cannot give them up unless they have an allergy. We don't speak about exceptions. So eggs usually are used in many, you can say, foods, whatever you think in your mind, in cooking style or dishes, or maybe could be sweets, just type of a dish that you may think about that has egg as main ingredient. Okay. So the idea of egg, or having a product or quantity demanded of egg, is usually inelastic. Why? Even now, think about it. Let's say it's priced now, let's say $10 per, let's say, tray. For a tray, $10. Let's say, I'm just giving an example. For some reason it rises up to 15. There will be a drop or fall in the demand and quantity because of the rise of the price, but this drop or this fall will not be that much high. It will be little. Why? Because the demand of egg is actually essential. People cannot give it up. However, if we think about chocolate, well, it depends on if you have kids at home or not. However, let's just think about adult people. If chocolate goes up high, let's say now your favorite chocolate is let's say $1 per unit. If it goes to $5 per unit, will you buy it? You may think about not buying it, or you may just consume extremely little of it. So in that case, this is extremely elastic. That means you are ready to give it up or reduce too much the amount when the price goes up high. So this is the idea. This is the idea of inelastic. If the price falls down, then quantity increases. If the price goes up, the quantity reduces. This is the idea of elasticity. Now let's think about few types of goods or services, demanded goods or services. Now think about two goods that are actually substitutes, things that we can replace, or it's possibly that we can replace one of them by the other. If, let's say, let's speak about tea and coffee. We gave it as an example in previous chapters, or exactly the previous chapter. So we spoke about tea and coffee, and we said they may be considered as substitutes for many people, just for having some caffeine, refreshment, or whatever, as a hot drink, just for refreshing the mood of a person. So in that case, if we consider these two goods as substitutes, well, in case when we have a substitute, the demand of a good will be more elastic. Why? Because there is a substitute that we can go to. We can give up that particular good. In that case, it's elastic. So its demand is not inelastic, it's elastic. We can give it up. We can go to another. or its own substitute, what we call. So in case of the availability of substitutes, we may have elastic demand. And this is the first determinant of the price elasticity. So think about any substitute of a good. If we have variety of substitutes, these goods that do have variety of substitutes usually have elastic demand. And the goods that do not have substitutes, usually they do not have elastic demand, they have inelastic demand. Now I mentioned about tea and coffee. How about eggs? Do we have substitute for eggs? I'm speaking about eggs in general, okay? So eggs, without determining from which bird or from which source. So since we say eggs, well, we don't have demand substitute for eggs? Well, that's a product that we do not have exactly a substitute for, and its demand is likely to be inelastic. Think about whatever comes to your mind as a good and see if it has a demand, if it has a substitute or substitutes or not. If it has, well, most likely the demand will be more elastic than other goods. If it doesn't, then it will be less elastic or maybe inelastic. Necessities versus luxuries. Now think about some goods or services that we consider in our life as necessities. Now think about education. Education for most of people and families is considered actually an essential or necessity that people usually do not give it up. So that's why you see parents usually spend a lot on their children's education. That's what we call necessity. You think about food, the main dishes that we consume, or the main ingredients of our daily dishes that we consume. These are necessities. We cannot usually give them up, and they are inelastic. We cannot, reduce their demand too much based on the increment of their prices. We can try to adapt our life to consume less of them, but we cannot give them up based on the increment of their prices. Luxuries like a vacation. Imagine, well, let's say hotel rooms go up high, airplane tickets go up high, whatever you may think about reservation, things like that. If they are too expensive, well, you may just think about, no problem, I'll just give it up. And that's why they are more elastic. And one more thing, I have to tell you this. It applies to maybe more than 90% of people, the idea of luxuries and necessities, but maybe we have 10 or 5% of population or the society, they think or they visualize necessities in different ways. So it's not necessarily that what you see as necessity, others look at it as maybe as not exactly necessity, or what you look at it as luxury, maybe others look at it as a necessity. Think about cars, owning a car. Some people think about owning a car as a luxury. Others look at it as a necessity, and it depends actually. So from society to society, from maybe family to family, so it depends. However, you can think about main items that we have in our life. Think about food and vacation. Think about many other things that we have as necessity versus luxury. Okay. You may think also of the definition of the market. The definition of the market actually determines whether the demand of a good or a service is elastic or not, based on what? Now, the broad definition of any market, of any quantity of a good, determines whether it is elastic or not. Now, we spoke about food, so let's speak about it again. When we say about food, we have inelastic demand. That means we cannot give up food in general. But if we go particular, let's say we pick up one of the foods that we have on a daily basis, or maybe once in a while, let's say chocolate. Okay, I keep giving these as examples. They are simple. Or maybe you think about ice cream. It's also a food that we consume, right? So how about its demand? Well, it's more elastic. So the narrower you go in any category, in any broad category, the more elastic the demand will be. So the general definition is inelastic in most cases. Then if you narrow it down, it becomes elastic. The more you narrow down, the more elastic the demand will be. Time horizon. Now, let me give a simple example, and this is a good example actually. Nowadays, in this crisis that we have of the time of Corona, people tend too much to buy and stock maybe gloves, masks, whatever, synthesizer, all these things that most of people are just stocking and buying. So what happens? The normal reaction is because there is more demand, the price goes high, and this is what we have already seen. Well, okay, now when the price goes high, we know from the law of demand that the amount or the quantity consumed or demanded will be reduced because some people, some buyers will leave the market. Maybe they cannot afford, maybe they protest this much high price, whatever the reason is. So in that case, well, up to a limit, the more. Now, in the beginning, what happens? It's like this. In the beginning, usually people try to abandon the market or actually try to not to buy, but their necessity or their need dictates that they have to buy it until they find a replacement for it, or until they adapt their life on not buying it or not having the good or the service that they are looking for. So I give the idea of gloves, masks, synthesizers, whatever. So initially, even if the prices go up high, people will not reduce their consumption much. It will be reduced, but not much. But after some time, it will reduce too much. So why? It will be reduced too much. Why? People will adapt themselves to the new style. They will try to find replacement. They will adapt their life on not having them. You think also of petrol or the gasoline or whatever diesel that people use for their cars. If it goes up high, people will try to consume less, yes, but not very quickly. It will take some time until they adapt their life either to take a ride by bus or maybe a carpool or change to economic cars like maybe a hybrid or whatever, cars that consume less of petrol based on the adaptation that they have in their life. And this is what we say. The demand is actually more elastic over longer time. So this is exactly the time horizon, and it matters. So if we speak about short run, usually the demand is inelastic. For the long run, the demand is more elastic. Okay. Now I explained about this one earlier, but let me just give an example. Let's say we calculate the percentage of the change in price. Let's say we find it is 10%. It's just an example. And we calculate the percentage change of the quantity. We find it 15%. We divide 15% on 10%, and that is the elasticity. Okay? So as I said, the idea of negative or positive elasticity actually doesn't mean much unless you just need to look at the direction, whether the fall of the quantity demanded or not, whether it is a rise in the quantity demanded. So we don't care about the sign here. It represents actually the movement along the quantity. So is it a fall in the quantity demanded or a rise in the quantity demanded? Is it a fall in the price? Is it a rise in the price? So we just drop it. So whatever you have as a negative sign, drop it at. Don't care about it. In this, I mean, for our case, there are other studies in economy consider that movement of the negative sign in their own studies. All right. So I said earlier, usually we calculate the change based on, or the percentage of the change based on end value minus start value over start value, or whatever, the end minus start over the start multiplied by 100. We can calculate based on this, but however, there is a problem with this kind of calculation. Why? Now let me explain this to you. Here's our quantity. Let's say we are moving from A to B, okay? So initial quantity is 12, final quantity or end quantity is 8, okay? So 8 minus 12, that's minus 4 over 8, okay? Multiplied by 100, that's 25. Drop the negative sign, that's 25, okay? Now, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. This is the final. I made a mistake, I'm very sorry. So 8 minus 12, that is 4 over 12, because this is the beginning. I mistakenly said 8. And you will get minus 33.33%. Drop this negative sign. Drop this one. You don't have to care about it. Now let's address the price. The initial, we said from A to B. So this is the start, this is the end. So the start is 200, the end is 250. I don't want to make this mistake. So 250 minus 200, that's 50 over 200 multiplied by 100, that's 25. So the idea here, 25% of course. The idea here, we have the percentage change in quantity. We divide it by the percentage change of the price, and then we get the elasticity. Drop the negative sign, you don't have to care about it. 1.33. Okay, keep this one aside. Let's go from B to A. I assume that we should get the same elasticity because we are moving actually along the way but the opposite side. Now if we do the same process from B to A, the problem is we will not get the same values. Now look, this is the initial price, this is the final price, this is the initial amount quantity, this is the final quantity. So let's start by the quantity. So this is the final, 12 minus 8, that's 4 over 8 multiplied by 100, so we will get 50%. Take this one, we are moving from B to A, so the initial is 250, the final is 200, 200 minus 250, and that's minus 50, drop the minus. So over 250 multiplied by 100, that is minus 20. You can drop the negative sign. So divide 50% over 20% will be 2.5. We don't get the same values. And this is a common problem with the standard method of computing the percentage. So what do we need to do about it? Because we are supposed to get the same values if we go from A to B, or if we go from B to A. We are not supposed to get different values. We are supposed to get the same values. For this purpose, what we are going to do is, and this is another example, I will not discuss it because we have already discussed this one. I just gave it to you as an extra, you can say, example. You can go through it. The idea here is we can take the midpoint. In the midpoint, we will calculate the percentage change in price and quantity based on it for both of them. And in that case, we will not have this difference of elasticity based on the movement from A to B. Now look at this. If we calculate from A to B, we will get 0.66. If we calculate from B to A, this is another example, okay, we will get 1.5. Now keep these two numbers in mind. Let's apply the midpoint. The midpoint is like this. Well, what we need to do, we take the exact midpoint. How can we get the midpoint? We can sum up the two values and divide by 2. That's exactly the average or the midpoint. And so what we will do, the end value minus the start value divided by the midpoint. And we will do the same to the price. And then if you apply this procedure, you will not get any change if you apply it to from A to B or from B to A. It doesn't matter. Now let's apply it to this one. 4, 6, 120, 80. Okay. Now this is the same, 4, 6 for the price AB, and 120 and 80 for quantity. Now take the midpoint. The midpoint 4 plus 6, 8, sorry, 4 plus, I'm very sorry, 4 plus 6, 10 divided by 2, that's 5. Okay, you do the same here. 120 plus plus 80, that's 200, divided by 2, that's 100. So these are the midpoints. Now we apply the same idea. So the start value, let's say we move from A to B. So this is the start value, this is the end value. 6 minus 4 over the midpoint. So that is 2 over 5 multiplied by 100, 40%. We do the same to here. So we are moving from 120 to 80. So 80 minus 120 over 100 multiplied by 100, that's 40%. So if we divide, we will get 40 over 40, or percent doesn't matter here because it will be eliminating. They will eliminate one another, and we will get 40 over 40, and that's unity. And we will speak about it. This is unity, unit elastic. Okay. If we apply from B to A, we will get the same. You can do this procedure, and you will see there is no difference here. If we apply, I'm sorry. If we apply, as we did earlier, I mean the procedure of calculating the final value or the second value or whatever, the end value minus the first value or the beginning start value over the start value, we will get different values. Well, if we apply the same procedure here of the midpoint, we will not get any different answer. We will get the same, moving from A to B or moving from B to A. So whatever question I ask you, apply the midpoint. So this is the way I usually ask questions about elasticity. Do not apply the standard way of calculating the rate or the change actually in price, okay, the percentage of the change in price and quantity. Apply the midpoint method. Okay. So now, based on it, now let's say we got some value like this, maybe 1, or we got another value like maybe 1.5 or 0.66 or whatever the value is. How can we interpret it? So what does it mean? So now remember those, and I will explain graphically about them in a while. If the demand actually is higher, if the elasticity is higher than 1, whatever we calculate, we find it higher than 1, greater than 1. Then the demand is elastic. That means the higher the price, the less demand will be. Okay. If the elasticity is less than 1, then that means the demand is inelastic. Okay. And the lower the value is, the more inelastic will be the demand will be. And the higher the price above, the higher the elasticity above 1 is, the more elastic the demand will be. Unity is exactly neutral. That means the elasticity is exactly unit elasticity, where the demand of the good will change, you can say, based on the constant rate. So increment or decrement based on the price will be, if the price is increasing, also the rate of increase will be unity, so it will not change much. So we have some products or some goods or services that have unit elasticity, and we will discuss them. These are special cases usually. Okay. We have another special case. If the demand is perfectly inelastic, people can never give up that good or service, then the price of elasticity of the demand is equal to 0. And the curve is vertical. This is a very special case. If the demand is perfectly elastic, well, the price of the elasticity of the demand is infinity, and the demand curve is horizontal. One more thing. Now, how do we know from a curve, if we are getting a curve, how do we know if it is elastic or not? The more flatter the curve, the demand curve is, the more elastic it will be. And the more steep it is, the more inelastic it will be. What do I mean? Just hold on. Now look at this. Now this is the first case, perfectly inelastic. Perfectly inelastic means what? Well, whatever the increment in the price, still people will order the same or will have the same quantity. Quantity will never change. And this is perfectly inelastic. Can you think about any good or service that people can never give it up? Whatever the price, or no matter what the price is, people will never give up the quantity that they are taking? Think about it. Whether even, again, I will rephrase what I'm saying. Is there any good or service that we can never give it up, no matter what its price is, or we cannot give up whatever the available demanded quantity that we have, no matter what the price is, or no matter how the price goes high, or no matter what the change of the price is? Now think about this. We have some way of steep. Steep means like we are going too much high, like this, of the curve. In this case, it's inelastic, and the rate of the change of the quantity is usually less, or the percentage of the change in the quantity is less than the percentage of the change of the price. And that exactly makes the product or the good or the service is inelastic. Its demand is inelastic. That means people cannot give it up even if the price changes. You will find some buyers leaving the market or not buying, but not as many as elastic goods or services. Let's go to another one. Look at this one. This is a unit elastic. Unit elastic, we have an equal rate of change. So the rate of change here is 22%, no matter what. It could be X%, and the rate of change of the price is also X%. Then in that case, we have unit elasticity, and this is a special case. Think about any good that we may have unit elasticity. Think about it. These are good actually to think and have, you can say, idea on some goods that may have this unit elasticity in our community. Okay, let's take the last two graphs. Elastic demand, as I said, is greater than 1. Is greater than 1, as I said, is flatter. It's like going flat. The curve is not steep like the previous one. It's going flat. So in this case, the rate of change in quantity demanded is higher than the rate of the change or the percentage of the change in the price. Okay, and then we have the perfectly inelastic demand. The perfectly elastic demand is exactly a straight line parallel to the horizontal axis. The x-axis, the horizontal axis. So in this case, the price will be fixed. The quantity demanded will change, but the price will be fixed at any time. Okay. Even if the quantity demanded is 0, the price would remain same. Think about a good can keep its price no matter what the quantity, no matter what the amount of the quantity demanded or the quantity demanded is. Think about it. Do we have such a thing in our reality? If we have, what could it be? Okay. Total revenue. This is another concept that we usually address while discussing elasticity, and has a relationship with the elasticity, and we will see how the total revenue is exactly the amount paid by the buyers and received by the sellers. Now we do not speak about the income. We speak about the total revenue. That means the capital, whatever the payment or whatever the payments the sellers had to pay for the product in order for them to sell it, and plus their own income, whatever the margin of their income they put on top of it. So this is the total revenue. Okay, so we calculate it. How it is calculated? The price times actually the quantity of the sold of the good. So it is the price times the quantity, P times Q. How do we see it? How do we visualize it? Imagine it as a box. This is the price, and we have the quantity. You can refer to the price by the height and the quantity by the width of this box, or the rectangle if you like. Okay. So if the price that you have is 4 and the quantity sold is 100, that's 4 times 100, that's 400. This is the total revenue. Okay. So now we have two cases. If the demand is inelastic, what happens if the price increases? If the price increases and the demand is inelastic, the total revenue will increase, and I'll explain how. If the price increases and the demand is elastic, then the total revenue will be decreasing. Total revenue is TR, we refer to it by TR. So how is that supposed to happen? Now look at these graphs. Now look at this. This is actually inelastic. We said it's steep, so it's going like somehow vertical. This is like a bit more flatter. It's like going parallel to the x-axis. Now look, this is inelastic. What happens? We said the percentage change of the quantity is less than the percentage change of the price. So what we have as a contribution of the change, the rate of change of the price, will be another square, another rectangle that's greater than this rectangular of the offset of those who are leaving or not buying because of the increment of the price. So A, this is a contribution to the total revenue due to the increase of the price, okay? And B is actually the reduction contributed or created or generated from those who are leaving the market because the quantity demanded will be less due to the increment of the price. A is generally greater than B in the case of inelastic demand, and in this case the contribution of A will be higher than B and the total revenue will be higher, okay? And this is usually a question I ask about the elasticity and the price. So the increase of price, the increment of the total revenue, and its relationship with elasticity. Okay. Now let's think about the case of elastic demand. The elastic demand, we said it is like flattered. Okay. It's flat, more flat. Okay. Now look, the contribution of the increment of the price is A, and as you see, it's really smaller than B. And this is the contribution, or this is, you can say, the reduction of the total revenue due to people abandoning the market, or actually less quantity demanded. And due to that, we will have reduction in the total revenue. So again, in the case of elastic demand, an increment in the price means decrement in the total revenue, or fall in the total revenue. For the inelastic demand, an increment or an increase in the price means an increase in the total revenue. And the reason why is because we have more contribution due to the increment of the price to the total revenue that surpasses the reduction due to the fall in the quantity demanded. And in the case of the elastic demand, the contribution of the rise in the price, or the contribution of the increment in the price, does not surpass the decrement of the fall in the quantity demanded. So the reduction of the total revenue due to the decrement or due to the fall in the quantity demanded surpasses the increment of the revenue due to the increment of the price. Okay, now let's discuss the linear demand. Now we may have a linear demand curve, but the elasticity is not constant in this case. Why? The slope of this the slope of this line is constant, yes, because this is a straight line. However, elasticity itself is not exactly the slope. It is actually the rate of changes in price and quantity. The rate of change in quantity, or the percentage of change in quantity over the percentage of change of price, and that will not remain constant. It depends on the where we are here. So now look at these prices and quantities. Now we may have a whole list. Now think about the price of $7, quantity of 0. So the total revenue is 0, and the percentage of change in price, that's 15. If you can calculate it based on midpoint, percentage of change in quantity, because we need to take the initial value or the start value, the end value, start value, end value. You can calculate it based on the mid value. We can take for all these numbers. Now, for example, for the first one, 13, the elasticity. That's very elastic. That's very elastic. So you see the price is high, quantity demanded 0. That means people are not interested. Okay, that's very elastic, and that's somewhere here. Okay, somewhere here. See? So elasticity closer to the high prices in any straight line is usually larger than 1, and that refers to an elastic demand. The elasticity will keep on dropping until we reach a unit elasticity somewhere, okay, unit between maybe 3 and 4, okay, of price, and quantity 6 and 8. And this is unit elasticity. Then the scenario will be reversed. We will start having elasticity that's less than 1, and it will be more inelastic, more inelastic, more inelastic, until we reach to a price 0 and quantity 14. Now look at this here. So price 0, quantity 14. That's very inelastic. High quantity demanded with a very low price. Okay. So what can we conclude actually? So the idea of like, well, when we have certain points with low price and high quantity, the demand will be inelastic. I just mentioned about it. Low price and high quantity, the demand will be inelastic until here. Okay, so all this part, you can say all this part. Low prices, high quantity demanded. Okay, like well, 8, 10, 12, 14. So relatively high, we say, with respect to others here. That's less than 1 as elasticity, or in terms of elasticity, that is inelastic. So the demand and quantity will be harder to give up. Okay, so if the price increases, lower quantities will be given up, or lower quantities will be reduced or gone or finished from market. That means it will not, the change in quantity will be less than the change in price, okay, as a percentage. At points with high price and low quantity, the demand curve is elastic. Now look at this. So high prices, low quantities, well, the elasticity is already large, greater than 1, and people are already ready to abandon the whatever quantities that they are demanding, or they reduce them already, because the elasticity is already large. I mean, the product itself as a demand, or the price, the elasticity of the price of the demanded good is high. So in that case, consumers or customers or whoever who is buying, or the buyers, will have the ability to abandon the market or lower the consumption of that good or service. So this is the first part actually of the chapter. We spoke about a brief view of the elasticity, and we spoke about its application in demand. We spoke about how we can calculate it in a standard way, and we said how we have a problem with calculating it in a standard way. Then we moved to the midpoint. We learned how to calculate it using the midpoint, and then we checked some of its application relevant to the total revenue, and we saw how it affects actually the total revenue, or how we can visualize the total revenue based on the elasticity of the demand. So for the next chapter, we will discuss, next actually part of the chapter, we will be discussing the elasticity of the supply along with other applications, and we will discuss some real-life examples and problems. Until then, have a good time. Goodbye.